So if you were to visit St. Petersburg in Russia in May or June, you'd be expecting potentially sunny skies, warm ambient temperatures, significant cultural and historical architecture. But what you wouldn't be expecting is plumes of smoke and a darkness clouding over the entire city. Indeed, picture the scene. It's early morning in St. Petersburg. Delegates, international relations and diplomacy are arriving from 130 plus countries for the most important annual economic showcase of Russia, for Putin, the event that Putin uses every year to tell the world that Russia is open, stable, and of course, worth doing business with. There would be private jets landing, motorcades pulling up, but as they're arriving, they look up. They see this black smoke billowing across the entirety of Russia's second largest city, of Putin's hometown, from one of Russia's most important oil export terminals on the Baltic Sea. Ukraine had sent its own delegation, but unlike every other guest at that forum, theirs didn't need an invitation. Now, I covered the extraordinary developments about Ukraine's strike on parts of St. Petersburg earlier in the week, but there's something even bigger, I think, happening simultaneously, a little bit further away from the central hubs of Moscow or St. Petersburg, that I don't think is getting as much coverage, but is actually the biggest story. Because whilst everyone else is watching St. Petersburg, something is quietly playing out elsewhere, revealing a lot more about the true state of Putin's grip on the world, grip on Russia, and its ability to influence places around it. Not just simply drone strikes or the forum or any speech could influence. The sheer capacity to retain historical and geopolitical leverage. Indeed, something that shows you that the rod isn't just on the battlefield, and it isn't just economic. Indeed, it goes much deeper than all of that. And once you see it, you'll understand why I think we are watching the beginning of something even bigger that cannot be stopped.
This is The Global Gambit.
Welcome to the channel, everyone, and what seems to be a bit of a travelling podcast at the moment, coming to you from Italy, as I've been here visiting some family. But indeed, the world never rests, and we are returning to the war in Ukraine, or between Russia and Ukraine, and increasingly perhaps in Russia. Now, before getting started, I just wanted to say that the situation over St. Petersburg does carry a particularly personal one. I've been to St. Petersburg many times, and it is one of the most arguably beautiful cities in the world. So to see the situation there is challenging. But unfortunately, we have to remember that this is all at the behest of Putin, who decided to launch this full-scale invasion 4 and a bit years ago. And if he hadn't, none of this would be happening. Ukraine is simply responding to the aggressor. But that being said, the St. Petersburg Economic Forum has been wrapping up largely. And if you watched my last video, which you can find in the description, you'll already know how it opened. Ukraine's drone on the oil terminal, smoke over the skyline as delegates were arriving. That image set the tone for everything that followed. Putin took the stage anyway, and what he said, but also what he refused to say, is worth paying attention to. Now, for starters, let's look at the guest list, because it tells you everything before Putin even opened his mouth. The forum's theme this year was, quote, shared values, the foundation of growth in a multipolar world. Indeed, no one loves the phrase multipolar world more than Putin. And the leaders who showed up represented such a world, or at least in theory. The presidents of Uzbekistan and Tanzania, China's vice premier, Indonesia's president, Bahrain's national security advisor. Saudi Arabia sent a large delegation, and the US sent the man overseeing Trump's Whitehall Bull renovation. Let's just sit on that for a moment. Not the head of the CIA or the deputy ambassador or the national security advisor. Trump's renovator chief of the ballroom. Shows you about the level of significance, perhaps, the United States see. Indeed, there were no Western heads of state, no major Western CEOs. The Russian Davos, as it's being called in 2026, is drawing the kind of attendance you'd expect from sort of a regional expo, or maybe just sort of a couple of people coming around for tea in the afternoon. And also, and I'm not making this up, the likes of Candace Owens, Steven Seagal, and certainly if that's the kind of company you're in keeping with, you know just how savoury the event must be. And then Putin gave his speech. And this is where it gets particularly interesting or revealing. Because at his own economic showcase, designed to project stability, confidence, power, he admitted that the budget deficit is likely to increase this year. He said inflation had slowed to around 5.2%, but he vowed to strengthen Russia's air defense systems and the security against Ukraine's long-range strikes. He said all this at an economic forum, the venue about investing in Russia, and the content essentially saying that we can't protect our own city, his own city. It's actually what happened off the forum when Zelensky sent Putin a letter. This was the first direct public message Zelensky has written to Putin since the full-scale invasion. He proposed a face-to-face meeting in a third country, a genuine, public, documented peace overture, on the record, in front of the entire world. But of course, Putin rejected it on the stage at the forum, calling the letter boorish and emphasizing he saw no point in meeting. Now, a lot of people hear that as Putin being stubborn or playing hardball or not wanting to look weak. But the reality is simpler and much more fundamental. Putin cannot agree to meet Zelensky. Not won't, but cannot. Because sitting across the table from Zelensky as a negotiation equal requires him to treat, therefore, Ukraine as a legitimate sovereign state. Indeed, the problem is twofold. He cannot see Zelensky as his equal head of state, but he also can't legitimize the sovereignty of the very nation he's invading. And that contradicts the ideological foundation of everything this war has been built on. The idea that Ukraine is not a real country, doesn't have a legitimate government, and that's what's happening in the SMO or military operation is to protect ethnic Russians from the Nazification of Ukraine. The moment Putin shakes Zelensky's hand as a head of state, he demolishes his own justification for his war. So the refusal isn't stubbornness, it's a structural impossibility dressed up as choice. And the fact that he had to perform that refusal on stage, at his economic forum, in front of plenty of delegates from the global south, he has been courting for years, while Zelensky simply extends a hand publicly, is one of the most significant moments I can think of in recent memory.
Hi everyone, just taking a pause from the regular scheduled programming to say a big thank you to those of you who support the show as members. But equally, if you're watching and you're passionate or curious about Russia, Ukraine, and the relationship to the West, the complexities, especially from someone who has backgrounds of both sides, as well as having worked in Ukraine, in diplomatic fields, then you're in the right place and certainly somewhere that you should consider tapping that subscribe button or at least giving the video a like. But also, one last thing, I'm currently visiting family and they taught this, which, well, I think is a work of art and encapsulates how we all really feel about Vladimir Putin. But back to the video.
But as I say, I think there is something else here that is even bigger, worth focusing on. Now, while all of that was happening in St. Petersburg, a former Soviet state was voting. Indeed, if you don't follow the South Caucasus closely, you might not know what has happened and why it matters. But it is important. You see, Armenia has gone to the polls, and Armenia wasn't just any Russian ally. It was considered Russia's anchor in that region, Moscow's loyal partner in the entire post-Soviet space. It hosted a Russian military base. It was the founding member of Russia's economic bloc, the Eurasian Economic Union. It was part of Russia's Collective Security Treaty, or CSTO. And for decades, the relationship between the two was the template Russia pointed to when it wanted to demonstrate that its sphere of influence was stable, willing, and durable. But that relationship is now in largely open collapse. And the way Russia has responded to losing Armenia tells you far more about where Putin actually stands than anything else that happened at its forum. You see, Armenia's Prime Minister, Nikol Pashinyan, has been steering his country westwards since 2018. He passed a law to begin the EU accession process. He signed a US-brokered peace deal with Azerbaijan, and he earned Donald Trump's personal endorsement for doing it. He recognized the jurisdiction of the ICC, active arrest warrants for Vladimir Putin, therefore, and so 30 European leaders gathered in the capital in May for a summit. Indeed, the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, visited weeks later and signed a strategic partnership. Russia watched all of this and decided in the 2 weeks up until this election just now to reach for every lever it had left to influence, to interfere. one of the clandestine grey zone methods it has to, well, retain power. Moscow banned the export of Armenian flowers, Armenian mineral water, Armenian cognac. The Russian president recalled his ambassador to the capital in protest, and Putin personally warned Pashinyan that Armenia was exposing itself to what he called, and the choice of words is deliberate, the Ukrainian scenario. He demanded Armenia hold a referendum choosing between the EU and Russia's economic bloc. He pointed out that Russia supplies Armenia with gas at 177 per thousand cubic meters, and that the European market prices exceed 600. To stop on that for a minute. Russia, which once commanded genuine loyalty, genuine military partnership, genuine strategic alignment with Armenia, has been reduced to banning flour exports and threatening gas prices to try and swing an election in a country of 3 million people. That's it. That is not the behavior of someone in control, a confident leader. That is the behavior of a power that knows it is losing and has almost nothing left to stop it. Now, did it work? Not really. The pro-Western trajectory and likelihood that Pashinyan's party will win is high. And this is what makes Russia's position even weaker than those tactics, because Armenia's military imports from Russia have already collapsed. Around 95% of Armenian military purchases now come from a mix of India, France, China. The military lever is gone. The only lever that Russia has left is economic, and even that has been countered. The EU stepped in just this week, with the European Commission pledging 15 million euros to offset Russian economic pressure and ease trade on the exact goods that Moscow targeted. Russia weaponized Armenian cognac, while the EU responded and made sure that we could get hold of what I'm sure is absolutely delightful produce. Russia is not only losing Armenia as an ally, therefore, it is losing its overall role as the regional mediator that it has been since the Soviet days between Azerbaijan and Armenia, a function that is incredibly important to the stability of the South Caucasus. That role has shifted to the US, the EU, and the Azerbaijanis and Armenians are holding direct talks with the White House, building trade relationships, while Russia isn't even in the room. But here is the thing about what's happening in Armenia that I think is getting missed when people cover it purely as a regional story. Armenia is not Ukraine. Russia hasn't invaded Armenia yet. Russia isn't sending troops. This is largely just soft power, influence, trade, alliances. And Russia is losing all of it in its closest ally without firing a single shot. That is the kind of different defeat than what's happening on the battlefield. And in some ways, it's more telling because it means the erosion of Putin's influence isn't a consequence of its overextension militarily in Ukraine. It's happening in places Russia isn't even fighting, simply because the model of Russia's partnerships has become so unattractive, or the overwhelming situation for Russia economically and internally is so bad that it can't do anything. The forum in St. Petersburg this week was Putin's attempt to project the image of a Russia that is credible and a leader of different industries. Armenia's election, by contrast, is a reality check. Whatever Putin says at the podium, the countries that know Russia best are voting with their feet. Indeed, Russia is fighting a war in Ukraine it hasn't won in 4 years and is now longer than the Soviets' campaign against the Nazis. Its economy is burning through its reserves that it cannot replace, and Putin's admissions about the economic conditions only reinforce that. Its flagship, his flagship forum, draws ballroom renovation officials and TV personalities. So Russia is fighting a war in Ukraine that it can't and hasn't been able to get anywhere in over 4 years, a campaign that is longer than the Soviets against Nazi Germany. Putin's economy is burning through reserves it cannot replace, and he has admitted as such. His flagship forum, it draws renovation officials or reality TV personalities, but it has flatly rejected any capacity for peace, despite the fact that he is seeing a systemic and perpetual decline in Russia's actual influence where it matters, his near abroad, his sphere of influence, and, of course, with one of his longest-standing historical allies. Despite everything that he says, from threats or efforts to show that Russia can intimidate the West, what's actually happening for him and internally couldn't be worse. If something cannot go on forever, it will stop. The question is no longer whether Putin's influence in the post-Soviet world is declining. The question is just how fast. And this week gave us two quite clear answers. One in the skies over St. Petersburg, but one in the polling stations of Yerevan. Both point in the same direction. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, then of course do give it a like. And as I said earlier, if you want to hear from someone who understands both sides or comes from both sides and cares about the intricacies of all these things, then do subscribe for more content like this. And check out this video here, an exclusive interview I had with Senator Mark Kelly on his visit to the Black Sea and the conditions down there. See you soon.